And behind me is the Afghan embassy of Washington, D.C. And one of the things that we need to talk about for a second is not the levels of crime and the fact that National Guard troops are now patrolling the streets in a show of heightened law enforcement with DC Metro Police, or just regular DC politics. What we need to talk about is the fact that sometimes geopolitics manifests on the buildings here in the city themselves. You can see behind me that this is a building that has now suffered some real neglect. Um, the door, very faded. Let me move out of the way a little bit here. Plants that have dried out, and some of everything used to be so pristine here. I want to show you more of that, and I'm going to take the phone off of the tripod and show you more. But this was a horrific day. I mean, I remember, and you probably remember, the sight of the people hanging off of the planes and the threats to Afghan interpreters who were going to the airport, trying to get through Hamid Karzai Airport onto those planes to safety, under threat of being targeted. The women and the girls who would on implementing a regulation whereby women can't make sounds around other women in public. It's just a very, very tragic situation. Last year, I wrote a letter to former Navy Corpsman Mike McCarthy, a source of mine who I'd spoken with about a month before the collapse. He was trying to get two interpreters that he had worked with out of the country, and he grew incredibly pessimistic about it, evidently. He took his own life. A lot of us reporters had incredibly difficult decisions to make ourselves as we were covering this. I was talking to these interpreters, and I and many other reporters kind of crossed lines and connected people, connected these interpreters with sources who were engaged in rescue operations to try to help them get out. One source who was involved in evacuation efforts contacted me and said, "This interpreter has to be at this safe house by this time. I keep calling him. He's not picking up." So it was the middle of the night in Afghanistan, and I think I called this guy, like, I'm not kidding you, I think I called him about 50 times to wake him up because he needed to get himself, his father, and his sister to a safe house. That was his only shot. For days, he had been going to Kaya. There was the Taliban that you had to pass by. There were the bullets in the air. People were fighting. It was absolute mayhem. He lost his elderly father for a little while, getting burned from just being in the sunlight, getting dehydrated, being seen traveling to these locations by neighbors who might betray you. He was not getting out. He couldn't get to needed to be. So I called him, calling his family members with him to this location. And he made it out. He lives here now. He has a job. His sister has a job. His father is all right. And they have been talking about what it was like in those days. I just texted him last night about it. The American that I worked with who helped him get out, I believe, is a national hero. And nobody will ever know that person's name. That person won't get credit for the work that was done. But I got to meet that person in person, and we went to an Afghan restaurant that's really close by to this location. Then we walked over here. This was a few months after everything had fallen apart in the country in Afghanistan. And we just walked over here and checked it out. And back then, things were much more pristine. And there was even this guy who was sweeping out front. I want to show you a little bit of the location. So Hang on for a sec. This could be a very inelegant presentation, so don't judge me on my videography skills. Okay. It's also really, really humid here. So there was this guy who was just sweeping over here and staff supporting the diplomats. And he was just trying to maintain the grounds. And because they didn't know what would happen if they were going to receive any salary after everything that had happened, he was driving one of these, shared ride systems. And he, like every Afghan I've ever met, like invited us to a family meal at his house. I don't know what happened to him. I didn't keep in touch with him, but let me just walk you around the embassy a little bit. So I remember when these were totally pristine, when these were full and vibrant. Looks like there's a little bit of mail here. Oh, there's a lot of mail that's been building up. I've seen several newspapers on the side. Um, Inside, you can see there's some painting or picture. There's a lot of chipping of paint now since it hasn't been maintained, and you can't really see in very much. It's in a very beautiful neighborhood, very wealthy neighborhood, close to the embassy of Yemen, the embassy of Monaco. Got another embassy across the way. I forget which one it is. Let's just bring it back a little bit. And I'll show you around the neighborhood. Another embassy here. So there's absolutely nobody here but me. I'm wondering if anybody is thinking about what happened on this day when everybody's just thinking about what happens with Ukraine when Trump and Putin meet. Let me put you back. Let's see if I can get you back. So, this is one of the weird things about living in this city that I don't think people talk about too much. That based on what's happening in other parts of the world, there's a group that exists diplomatically in this city who are severed from their homeland, who have to figure out what to do with themselves. And the buildings that have these ties to their homeland now are also kind of unmoored. Um, I'm seeing more people show up, and I don't really know what else to say. I I hope that today is a day where people don't just talk about the conversation that Trump will have with Putin, although that is incredibly important. But I hope that people look back on what happened 4 years ago, what the United States chose to do, how it affected the Afghan people, where the country is today. When the war in Ukraine, the full scale invasion, I should say, began in 2022, that was when coverage of Afghanistan really fell apart. Nobody nobody could cover it anymore. There was so much to cover on the front of Ukraine that it fell to the wayside. And then it happened to Ukraine when October 7th happened, when Hamas attacked Israel and then Israel retaliated in Gaza. So there's layers and layers and layers, and things are forgotten. But today, we have to remember what happened in Afghanistan. I know I was visiting family in Connecticut, and I got a notification on my phone. I was sitting at a restaurant around lunchtime, and I just sat at the table weeping, thinking about the people that I knew, people who I had covered, the interpreters, and the service members who were trying to get them out. How some of these interpreters, they were soft spoken. They were they were very gentle. What would befall them in this time of chaos? And I could not stop crying. For the first time in my life, the place where I had rented, which was really close to the beach, the woman who owned it had said, stick around. You can have a few more days here for free. And man, who doesn't want that when you're on a vacation? But I knew I had to get back to DC. I knew that I had to keep covering this collapse. And the days ahead were incredibly chaotic, even though I was just in my own home. Remember, it's still pandemic times, and heading in for the live shots. But it was important to be back and to tell those stories. And for me, August has an air of sadness to it because I remember what happened. So sorry, there's no crazy scoop today on the intelligence community, but this is important. So thank you for participating in this, and have a good weekend. And remember to keep these people in mind: the US veterans, the Afghan interpreters, their families, people who chose to take their lives around this time and after this time as a result of their memories and of their service. Let's just all keep that in mind. Thanks.